Welcome to the IAM CX podcast. This podcast series shares information and best practices on using customer experience strategies to increase customer engagement and operational success to make business in the Caribbean a paradise driven by data. I am Richard Dorsey, the CEO of Island Analytics and Marketing, IAM for short. We are a Caribbean-based data and marketing consulting company here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm joined once again by our wonderful co-host, Mr. Roger Nicholas, the Director of Customer Experience for IAM. And in this IAM podcast, we feature our special guest, Mark Slatin, as we discuss how financial services industry can be empowered with customer experience strategy. Mr. Slatin is a man whose passion for customer experience is truly inspiring. He firmly believes in the power of serving others, not just for its positive impact on their lives, but also for the ripple effect it creates, making the world a better place. Mark's approach to helping his clients is rooted in empathy and understanding. He takes the time to listen, to comprehend their goals, their visions, and their challenges. Drawing from his wealth of real-world experience as a CX practitioner, he empowers his clients to achieve their business goals by acquiring and retaining customers. Key phrase, retaining your customers. Before founding EmpoweredCX, Mark spearheaded an award-winning CX journey at Sandy Spring Bank. Under his leadership, the bank garnered numerous accolades, including the CX Innovation Award twice, Great Places to Work, Forbes America's Best Bank, and the Washington Post Top Workplace, to name a few. Mark's commitment to customer experience extends beyond his work with clients. He currently serves on the board of directors of the Customer Experience Professionals Association and chairs the Higher Education Subcommittee. He has also shared his expertise with the next generation of CX professionals, designing and teaching a customer experience management course in Loyola University's MBA program. Mark's voice is well known in the industry thanks to his popular Delighted Customers podcast, which has over 2,000 downloads and features top experts in the field. His insights have been featured in the book Chief Customer Officer 2.0 and Customer Experience magazine. Before stepping into his CX leadership role, Mark spent 2 decades in sales management, working for 2 Fortune 500 companies, Boise Cascade and Standard Register. He holds a BS in marketing from the University of Maryland and an MBA from Loyola University of Maryland, and he's a certified customer experience professional. When he's not immersed in CX, Mark enjoys spending quality time with his children and grandchildren, working on home projects, and indulging in a round of golf, as he likes to say, chasing a little white ball around. Welcome, Mark, to the IAM CX podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for quite an introduction, and it's an honor to be here. I'm excited, and I love the Caribbean. I'm looking for any excuse to get down there.
Oh, yes.
We'll give you one, Mark. Don't worry. Well, we'll dive right in. We're really glad to have you here. We wanted to pivot a little bit in the way we've done the podcast, Mark, to focus on a specific industry, without forgetting the fact that there's so much about customer experience strategy that's transferable to other industries. So today's focus is going to be on financial services industry, which you have a lot of experience with. So give us, in a couple minutes, a brief understanding of your background in financial services, and then help us understand if the reason you started and founded EmpoweredCX was because of some type of unmet gap in financial services or some other reason.
Sure. My background really for over 2 decades was in sales and sales management. You mentioned Boise Cascade and Standard Register, just sort of classic, traditional Fortune 500 B2B companies. And after that, I went to go work for a management consulting firm, helping companies with revenue growth and strategy. And one of our clients was the bank that I ended up working for, was working there as one of our clients for several years. And at one point, the CEO said he wanted to have an internal resource to run this new thing called customer experience. It was right around the time the CXPA, the CX Professionals Association, was formed about 12 years ago. And so that's how I got involved in working for the bank. And I enlisted the help and support of Gene Bliss at that time, who was one of the co-founders of our association and wrote the book, The Chief Customer Officer, one of the luminaries in our field, and worked over nine years before I started EmpoweredCX.
Okay.
At the end of that time, I had wanted to go back into consulting and do my own practice for the purpose of kind of sharing my knowledge. Had a number of successes, but even more failures along the way. And I think I learned more from my failures than my successes, and thought maybe I could help some people avoid some of those failures.
Yeah.
As my dad used to say, it's easier to learn from other people's mistakes. So maybe they could learn from my mistakes and accelerate the path for them to get the kind of business outcomes they're looking for through enhancing the experience that their customers receive from them. So that's how and why. And you mentioned the board. I joined the board of CXPA primarily because it saddens me that still, even at this point as we're speaking, that customer experience or experience management isn't a given in every organization, like accounting, marketing, audit, whatever have you. It ought to be. It really should be, because after all, if we're not serving and delivering for our customers, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely agree. You said something about failures earlier. Hey, Michael Jordan missed more final buzzer shots than he made, and he's still a rock star. So you're on the path to rock stardom. That's basically it. That's what you are, Mark. So
Any analogy, even if it's failures, I'd be happy to be in that same sentence with Michael Jordan.
Yeah. But speaking about your journey, before you really began your CX process, what were the challenges that made you realize there needed to be a different solution? And within those challenges, what were the markers that you used, now realizing that maybe CX was a possible solution for those problems?
Yeah, I think coming from the sales side of it, you're kind of on the other side of the desk, if you will. You're looking at trying to solve problems for customers, and you're out of control of the design of the experience. You're delivering part of it as someone on the front line, but you really start to notice that it isn't just products. And when I was working for both those companies, there were products, they were physical products, but how we got those products to customers, how they experienced us, was way beyond the product. That was only a small part of it. And so that was a differentiator. I mean, we were in a commoditized industry. I was in office products industry. I was in the printing business, very commoditized. And I'll add, one of the most commoditized businesses is banking right now. So you have to differentiate on the experience. And some of the the way that I got involved with the bank was the CEO had received a number of these little suggestion cards. They were like the size of a postcard, and they were at all the branches. Keep in mind, the bank did other things than just the branch network. It had commercial lending, commercial deposit relationships, an insurance subsidiary, a wealth management company, mortgage division. So, but the branches were where the feedback cards came in from, and they were inconsistent. Some of them, most of the time, they were good. They were praises, you're doing this great. But then every once in a while, there was one that was not so good. And it disturbed the CEO, and he knew that they could do better. And so that's why they brought me in, to take a look at it more strategically, more intentionally. How could we apply proven methodologies from some of the best companies, some of the world-class organizations, to, in this case, our financial institution?
Mhm.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, we'll probably get back to that and get a little deeper into that in a second. In the Caribbean, we tend to make the mistake of blaming our frontline teams when we miss targets and that type of thing, and then use training as some type of punitive and corrective measure. Right? Go figure. I don't know if that happens anywhere else in the world, but it happens quite a bit in the Caribbean, right? What was, in terms of a before and after type thing, what was the morale, the productivity, the engagement like prior to customer experience strategy being implemented at the bank? And then what was it like after? Because I think that'll help our audience understand the impact on the employee side of things.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Roger. I think if you go back to that time in the financial services industry, there were a limited number of tools available to help understand what the customers were feeling about your brand. There were things like mystery shops,
Right.
something called SQI, which is a service quality index, kind of, if you will, off the shelf ways to measure success. And it became a little bit frustrating, and there was some measure of attention put on it because it was connected to pay either through a bonus or a performance review process. And so it got people's attention on the branch network, but it also was an imperfect science. And for example, the mystery shops, right? The lady with the red hat was the mystery shopper. So one branch would call to the next branch and say, hey, the lady with the red hat's coming over. It wasn't so mysterious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They knew who it was. The scores were always, perfect or near perfect.
Yeah.
And if they weren't, someone got shot. So because the bar was raised to this high level, because most everybody did well. Service quality index was also something that I think it was micromanaged, but it should have been macro managed. And there wasn't any feedback loop, because all the information, whether it was mysteries or whether it was SQI, were anonymous and generic. And how do you coach to that? How do you train to that, where it could have been an incident or a pocket or a new person, and you're going to try and develop a solution based on in perfect information. So what we did was several things. One is, it's as much in the minds and the hearts as it is the data, but we did have to get the data right. So the first thing we did was we stood up a VOC, a Voice of the Customer platform, so that we could ask the right questions to the right people and try and get a broad enough, representation of our customers, but also to get verbatims and qualitative feedback as well, and start to put themes together about what was going on. And we did it on a more regular basis, so we can kind of the ebbs and flows of what was happening. We can capture that and create a closed feedback loop, so that we could, if there was an alert set up, if there was some not so good situation happening somewhere, that we could respond very quickly and provide the right coaching, the right tool for whatever the diagnosis was. So I think that was part of it, really setting up the VOC. If not only setting up a VOC, and I'm talking about a platform, but there's many different ways to listen to customers. So setting up a listening strategy for customer insights and understanding is going to be critical. But then also, what are you doing culturally to impact it? We set up something called Meeting in a Box, which is one of the 2 innovation awards we won at the bank. And that was pretty simple in concept, something anyone could do in or out of financial services. Essentially, it was something that we coordinated with our learning and professional development team, we being the CX folks, and developed a 20-minute or so mini meeting that would, in essence, augment whatever that team meeting was that month. And it was on a monthly cadence. The rhythm was every single department in the organization will be talking about the same thing that month. And it was centrally developed. We developed it, as I just shared, but it was locally implemented, meaning every single department got to talk about their side of the world, what issues. The questions might have been generic, but it was specifically applied to their area. So over a period of time, we were infusing the culture with CX and EX principles. And to your question about the impact, so eventually, one of the things we did was created awareness about what it is. So it's one thing to respond to a survey and try and improve a score. So many people have gamed that process, or, as I mentioned earlier, been frustrated by it because there's nothing they could do about it, and they're getting dinged on their performance reviews.
Right.
But what could you do to have people really feel like they can make a difference? Number one, see how all the dots connect, right? Explain in some of these communications, trainings, whatever you want to call it, how does my role as an individual impact the overall experience? Yes, in the quote unquote back office, which I'm not a big fan of that world, those people who serve the people who serve the customers, they all play a role. Everybody is a link in the chain to a successful experience for the customers. But do they know how? Do they know that? And do they know what our goals are? Which is really connecting that giving them that line of sight to the end user, the customer, and how their role, whether they're in legal or they're in audit, treasury management, how they impact the customer. So kind of a long-winded answer, but we did create a tremendous amount of awareness, and we did create a desire for more people to be engaged in our movement within the organization.
Was there an unexpected turnaround from a particular department, like a little novelty situation? Like I didn't anticipate maybe this section of the business really taking it and running with it, something that caught you off guard?
I think there's a couple of things that happened. One is, if you think about the branch network, and in our organization, the branch network was a very, very important part of the organization, because a lot of our small business customers came from personal banking relationships. Like the relationship evolved, they became, or they were a small business, they became a larger business. So it was really important, but many people would say it's a very expensive billboard for business clients, which were really the meat and potatoes of the revenue stream.
Right.
And wealth and insurance, et cetera. So these other auxiliary services that we had. I think one of the things that helped is when people started to understand that we were allies, meaning the CX department, and trying to help them do their job and achieve their goals better, not conflicting in terms of our goals, our priorities. Well, the whole leadership group within the branch network became a panel of ours, and we worked together to deconstruct and then reconstruct how we asked the questions, what measurements we used, the frequency. So the whole co-creation of the design of the listening there. And then, of course, the follow-through. What we were asking and the data that we collected was data that they co-created with us. So they took ownership of it. And I guess, that's one particular example. I'll give you one other one real quick, and that's the call center, because every bank has a call center. If you're of a decent size, I shouldn't say every bank, but if you're of a decent size, certain size, you're going to have a more of a centralized way to respond quickly to customers. And they were using an off-the-shelf way to ask their customers how they felt about the experience. In many ways, they didn't have time to do what they called wrap-up codes, which were ways to assign a reason for the call to the reason the customers were calling in. We don't have time. We don't have enough people. The wait time's too long. We got to get to the next customer. So we work with the contact center team, and developed a survey that happened overnight from a call. And we asked the reason for the call on the survey. And we got not the agent's reason why someone called in, but the customer's reason why they were calling in. Which would you rather have?
Yep.
And, but by the way, we didn't get it sporadically, we got it consistently. And so we were able to get a good grasp of why customers were calling in. As it turned out, a huge percentage, and I'm sure this is true for many organizations, not just banks, were calling in because they couldn't get onto the system to log on.
Yeah.
Right? They had system access issues that had probably good intentions, security. You want to keep a bank, you want to keep your money safe, but at the same time, you lock it down so much, or you don't make it intuitive for customers to figure out how to reset their password, for example, or you make them call in to reset their password. You're creating a lot of unnecessary friction for customers, to the point where if they have another choice, they could go to another bank. You get to the point where they say enough's enough and I'm going to switch. So just understanding the reason of the call helped us dramatically work with our IT security folks and work with our call center folks and redesign that experience so that they were spending time on valuable resources for our customers and not helping them do password resets.
Oh, wow. I think this touches on the quote we wanted to share with the audience. You said, Most organizations struggle because each department views the journey through their own lens, typically based from an inside-out perspective. Is there anything else you want to add that I think in the last couple you kind of touched on most of what that quote encapsulates?
Yeah, I think some of this, you understand the friction from the customer when you ask them and you start to get this data. The other part of it is, okay, understanding why, like why internally this may be happening. And a great example is the policies that you've set up.
Mhm.
So you might have to go to the branch to do a wire transfer, right, for security reasons. Well, not every small business owner is going to get in their vehicle and go to the branch to do something like this. Are there organizations that are doing it other ways? On the other hand, sometimes you walk into a branch and you need to get something done, and they would need to contact the contact center or retail administration, which is another department in the organization that supports the branch network. Why? Do you realize the friction that you're putting on the customer? Many of them would want to self-serve, right? Many of them would be willing to go a little bit of extra to be able to do it without making a trip somewhere. The irony is you've got someone in front of with a customer in front of them who's a branch manager, let's say, on hold at the contact center with the customer. They're both waiting on hold. That's not a good optic.
Yeah.
Right? It's never a good optic. So, and I'm not singling out any one bank or the bank that I work for. This is a common symptomatic error of someone really not understanding customer experience management, and understanding the journey through the customer's lens.
That is a.
I need you in the Virgin Islands to talk to some banks. You're touching on a lot of pain points for us here in the territory. Sorry.
Happy to do a site visit. Happy.
Bring your golf clubs. Well, that's a perfect segue for the next question that I have. I know you're big on journey mapping, because that's a central iterative process in customer experience management. What are some best practices in journey mapping, and what are some of the outcomes companies or C-suite can expect from journey mapping? And if you don't mind, if you can put that in the context of C-suite love language, which is revenue and cost management and competitive advantage, that'll be appreciated.
Yeah, so I'm gonna share both the C-suite language and also just common sense. Common sense.
We like that. We like that. Thank you.
Where we just left off is the common sense part, right? Is like you could look at a financial statement, you could look at it at an income statement and not see what I just described, which is the customer at the desk in the branch on the phone with someone at headquarters, right, waiting on hold,
right,
for an answer that they should be empowered to deliver for the customer.
Yes.
The journey map is a physical representation, a visualization of that usually involves cross-functional members who are familiar with what the process is internally and externally, right? And so instead of pointing fingers, and I will tell you, you were talking about outcomes. I've seen some of the greatest breakthroughs in an organization when you have opposing sides, if you will, getting together in the same room. And instead of blaming each other for what's not working, looking at a visual, maybe it's a whiteboard, or we use a roll of brown craft paper, to start mapping what the customer goes through at the different stages and identifying touch points. Nowadays, you can do that digitally. You can do it across the land, far and wide, and use tools. Same concept, though, is that we're mentally getting in the heads and minds and hearts, the emotional connection with customers. So now let me switch over without getting into the actual process of journey mapping and talk about it from the C-suite. So as you start to identify what those points are, and I'll just share, for me, there's two things we're looking for. One is what are the pain points or the biggest points of friction for the customers? how can we alleviate those? What's causing them? What impact does it have, both on the customer emotionally and on the business financially? Right? That might help us prioritize which ones we're going to go work on first. So understanding a deeper knowledge than we would have you can't get that from a financial statement, Roger. You can't see that on a financial. You can only see why maybe sales are dipping, or we're having runoff with our accounts. Retention isn't as high, customer churn's higher. This will tell you, maybe give you more insight as to what's going on from the customer side. And then you can start to ask the questions, what's going on with the way we are delivering this? Have we empowered, have we trained, have we empowered our people? Are the policies legacy, are they old? And on the other, that's the first thing, is where's the friction? Where's the pain? The other piece of it is, what are the opportunities? Where can we potentially wow a customer? Where can we turn it from just delivering a service to creating a memorable experience for the customer? And a great example of that, and this is going to be kind of sound a little maybe morbid or weird, but Chewy. Chewy's a company that does what Amazon does for pet owners, right? They automate, they deliver, pet food and pet supplies, etc. If you lose your pet, if your pet passes away, it is standard protocol for them to send like a card, flowers to you after that loss.
That's a nice touch.
You could very well be a lost forever customer. At that emotional moment, there's nothing worse than losing your pet if you're a pet owner, in regards to the ownership of that animal, that pet that you had. And so they're aware of that. That was an opportunity, a moment to make a difference. It could be if you're an insurance company, when a claim happens. If you're a bank, when a loved one is lost, or you're going through some change of life situation. So when you start to dial in on those moments, you can start to put metrics on how are we doing. And that could be, and I say metrics, it could be measurements. So it could be how many times someone clicks on your website, how many times someone has to do a password reset, going back to what we were just talking about that. How many times people call in for the reason of having login access. How many people, what is the churn rate? So you look at these different points within the journey, and you put a measurement on those that you can track. And there are software companies out there that do journey mapping management software that allow you to have both a visual representation and plug in a metric at that spot that can measure those things. As a CX leader, you should have a dashboard, an executive level dashboard, that connects the dots from that to the metrics the C-suite cares about. So that's my answer. It's both common sense, and it's also the C-suite language.
Wow, I love the examples you gave, man. And I was counting on you being the teacher spirit that you are, and you just taught a whole bunch in a few minutes, right, Richard?
Definitely, and common sense isn't common, Mark. That's one thing I've realized.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
I've been reading. I started reading Fred Reichhel's latest book, Winning on Purpose, and he talks about earned growth versus bought growth, and he differentiates them by the level of marketing spend and resources allocated to generate new customers. And he kind of defines earned growth as the growth and revenue we receive from referrals. By treating our existing customers well enough, they're excited to give us a greater share of wallet. They're excited to stay longer. And because of those two excitements, they're excited and willing to promote us to their friends and family. In your opinion, how do you see that earned growth approach working in financial services?
So yeah, I'm a big fan of Fred's, and as you know, he and Rob Markey created Net Promoter System.
Yep.
And and he's incredibly wicked smart, as they say in Boston.
It's smart. Yep.
And earned growth is the next thing, and I really like it because I'm a big fan of customers who love you so much, so loyal to you, that they're going to want to come back and tell their friends, and that's kind of the sense of it. And then the question is, the earned growth model is saying essentially that when you look at customers that you've bought, if you go downstream a year, 2 years, that segment of customers is either not profitable or the profits are so much smaller than those that have come to you for the reasons we just talked about. It's financially wise to focus on that. So if you're a bank, for example, instead of lowering interest rates on loans to bring in loans, or increasing, given a short-term increase in a rate on interest rate on a checking account or savings account, you are focusing on delivering great experiences to those customers, so much so that they want to tell their friends about you. They stay longer. Look, in banking, what we found was that unlike some other industries, maybe insurance is a good example, life insurance. In banking, most business clients have a second bank. Like there's a primary and there's at least one secondary bank, and there's maybe for some obvious reasons, but they could switch. They have choices. And on the retail side, they always have choices. Now it's, you could argue it's even easier than ever to switch banks.
Yes, it is.
Right. In commercial, it's
our competition as well in some spaces.
Yes. So yeah, you've got fintech and all these disruptors going on. So focusing on how you can deliver a better experience, as he talks about, and then figuring out a way to measure where your referrals, I call them customer to customer referrals, or people within banking, I guess it's pretty common, especially if you're structured in the way that I mentioned we were, which is wealth, insurance, commercial, retail, mortgage. You're looking across the enterprise, and you want to have cross-selling, right? You want to measure those internal referrals. No argument there. You want to encourage. You want to feed the beast. Why have a business unit if you're not feeding it with, and the best referrals are existing customers. So why wouldn't you do that? But Fred's onto something here, because, and it's hard, I think, for companies to really do that. It's easier said than done. And I think he was on one of my episodes on the Delighted Customers podcast, and he talked about, it's an emerging market, and there are companies in the software space that are helping companies understand how you're getting customer to customer referrals, where they're coming from, ways to track that. Once you figure that out, it's a little bit easier to track what they're spending, what their relationship is on the financial side with you. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. And I think more importantly for our audience, they understand the journey of and the benefit of doing well with your existing customers, with the not the sole purpose, but a main purpose of generating earned growth, as we just discussed, earning those referrals. There's research out there to show that referred customers tend to spend 16 to 20% more than the people who referred them and stay a little bit longer. So their customer lifetime value is greater. So why wouldn't we want to spend a different mix of our marketing resources towards acquiring new and then nurturing current customers in order to generate that type of outcome? So absolutely did answer my question. Richard, what did you think?
I'm blown away that once again CX continues to show the power of customer engagement and how you can really cultivate that beautiful relationship that would lead to a valuable customer lifetime. But one of the things we struggle with in our channel, or rather in our community, is that the level of CX maturity is so low that when we have some of these conversations, it sounds like something separate and apart from what their normal operations. includes. So what would you say is a good level of CX maturity to start with? And if you're working with someone who has or maybe you're not, but if you're encountering someone who doesn't have a strong CX understanding, how would you guide them closer and closer to this as a possible strategy for their business?
Yeah, I think one simple way to understand, there are a lot of maturity models out there, and that would be a good place to look at experience or customer experience maturity model. Experience meaning both employee and customer experience. Customer experience meaning more of a focus on the customer experience. Maturity meaning how close are you to world class? Like, where are you? Some are just even unaware, infant, just starting out, all the way to optimized, fully optimized, in acting like the Disney, Chick-fil-A, Ritz, you name the leaders in the market. One of the things that comes from a maturity model oftentimes is an assessment. I have a model that I created based on the Customer Experience Professionals Association 5 competencies, and created an assessment. It's free. I'll share the link with you guys. You can put it on your site, maybe in the show notes, but there are a lot of good ones out there. And one way to do that is to take a short quiz test, answer the questions honestly, ideally have your whole leadership team answer those questions and see where they may differ within the group, and then see the average for the group. And that's a good starting place. We did that every year we had something called the Client Experience Leadership Council. And it was senior vice presidents and a couple of executive level sponsors in the group from all across the organization. And we had them look at it and take it every year. We did it as a group activity. And there are 5 categories. 5 categories. So you got a baseline, right? I see you doing this with your hands. You got a baseline, then you can compare year over year and be honest with you, like each category, where should we draw the dot? Where is the dot now? Where is the dot in this category? And then you can say, okay, out of these 5, we're halfway through, we're 1/4 of the way through. What should we be prioritizing next? But at least then you can use that to design your CX roadmap and agree upon what needs to be prioritized. And you're building it out. You can't boil the ocean all in one day. So you really need to have a thoughtful, strategic approach. And if you don't have anything or really anyone involved, hire a company like IAM, hire a company like EmpoweredCX. There are plenty of people out there.
If you want, you can say that again as many times as you want.
Well, and just to affirm what you're saying is, if you compare that to hiring a full-time CX executive, it's a lot less expensive.
Yes, it is.
And a lot less risky, because you're hiring someone who's got, like I started at the top, all these failures behind them that you don't have to pay for.
Yes.
They've paid for that. I've made those mistakes. You don't have to,
Well said.
So, Roger, I think we need to break that down for our audience a little bit. So it's take an assessment. Don't be afraid. Take the test. It's
a baseline assessment.
It's not your physics final exam anymore. It's something that's going to help your company. So take the assessment. Once you understand where you are in assessment, find a professional, preferably EmpoweredCX or IAM LLC. And then trust that professional, because that's the other thing that we've experienced, especially in our Caribbean market, is that when you're dealing with especially small businesses, there's so much emotion attached to how they operate their business. And CX has that very uncomfortable role of telling you, you're not doing this as well as you think you're doing it. You're not doing it in the best interest of your customers. Or when you get to EX, you're not treating your employees as good as you think you are. So it's kind of like a very, open and rough conversation. So take the test, find a professional, listen to the professional, and trust the process. I think that's the last one. You got to trust the process.
Yeah. Wow. Mark, you touched on something else that actually we talked about offline, with regard to the free CX roadmap that you offer on your website. Can you tell us what you include in your roadmap ebook and what mistakes it can help C-suite to avoid?
Sure. Well, the roadmap is, as you mentioned, I'll give you the link as well. But the idea is to lay out what a plan would look like, right? A plan for how would you build a plan
Mm-hmm.
to improve the experience that your customers have with you as an organization. So it starts off, and I give you the 5 steps really quick, but it starts off with this needs assessment, this assessing the current state. Where are you currently? And then kind of looking at the future state, where would you like to be ideally? And that includes making a corporate statement, a CX mission statement about how you want your customers to feel ideally going forward. And maybe even developing some principles that are customer interaction related. Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, these organizations have those. They're sort of a way of being. Starbucks called it the green apron because they were put in the green aprons of the Starbucks baristas. Then when you do the current state, future state, you're going to have some gaps. So identify what those gaps are. That's the
Right.
third step. And then the fourth step, and we talk about, what to look for and how to assess those. And then the fourth step is how to prioritize projects. So out of these gaps, you're going to work with your team, and this is something like an IAM CX consultant could help you orchestrate in some sort of workshop with leadership. Say, hey, here are the things. Here's where the assessment came out. What should we work on first, right? And that's prioritizing these projects. List the projects, prioritize them. And then fifth is plug them into a roadmap. Build your CX roadmap. 2 to 3 years, lay them out, because you're not going to do everything at once, but you want to get something on the map. That's a high level version of what's included, since you asked, in the CX roadmap. And just to I don't know if you're going to ask me this, but just maybe getting ahead, so I apologize, is CX Day, the CX Professionals Association established the first Tuesday of every October to be CX Day.
Yes.
And I think that was 7 or 8 years ago, maybe longer. And so the encouragement is for every organization to do something internally with their organization to celebrate the day. Maybe share some news about your CX department, what you're doing, maybe something around customers, what your customers are saying about your business, whatever it is. And then the association itself offers a bunch of webinars and tools that day that they'll roll out. That day, I'm going to offer a how to build your CX roadmap webinar for free. That'll be on that day to celebrate CX Day.
Okay.
It's October 3rd this year.
I believe it's October 3rd. Yeah. That's a nice plug there. October 3rd. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it first on the IAM CX podcast, October 3rd. Mark your calendars. You want to be a part of that webinar. All right.
Definitely.
Wow. I'm full. I'm very full. I'm good.
Definitely.
I think our audience gained something valuable today, especially not just financial services, but I think across industries. There's so much, and please don't miss this, ladies and gentlemen, there's so much that's transferable and customizable in customer experience strategy. Don't think because you operate an ice cream shop that you can't steal some things from the banking industry, or tourism can't steal some things from banking, or whatever. Please don't miss the forest for the trees. Okay. Richard, did you have anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mark. So, what do you have on the horizon for you? What will you be chasing besides the golf balls in the foreseeable future?
Well, let's see. I am excited about my podcast, and I would encourage your audience to not only listen to this one, but subscribe to your podcast, right? Follow it, so that all you have to do is go to one of the platforms, that your favorite platform, and just hit the follow or subscribe, and they'll just come to you each week, so you don't miss one. I have a podcast too called Delighted Customers Podcast. It's free, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you'll probably put it in the show notes, but those are great ways to get messages when you're driving around, going for a walk, jogging, whatever you do for fun. listen to these. They're great ways to hear from the experts, and just people who have experience in it. Like I said, have failed many times. So I'm doing that. I do speaking events. I'll be speaking at Michigan State University in early November.
Okay,
On
Tom DeWitt and his people. That's awesome.
Yeah, Tom DeWitt. Yeah, good friend, good friend and good guy. And it's a first degreed program, a Master's of Science degree in Customer Experience Management. So big fan of his, and always on LinkedIn. I post every day, Monday through Friday. Try and share some wisdom, announce guests that I might be having on the next podcast. So you can catch me there as well. And EmpoweredCX.com is my site, Delighted Customers Podcast. And also I do a newsletter called Delighted Customers Newsletter that you can get there as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. And I hope, audience, you've heard it here. Mark Slatin, he is the guy that understands how to be empowered with CX.
Yes, CEO of EmpoweredCX. Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your wisdom and your premium time, because I know you're busy. So thank you for saying yes and sharing your wisdom with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is another episode of the IAM CX podcast. We're going to do something a little different in August, so stay tuned for that promotion. You don't want to miss it. But thank you so much for joining us at the IAM CX podcast. My name is Roger Nicholas, Director of Customer Experience at Island Analytics and Marketing. And I want to also thank my co-host and CEO, Richard Dorsey. Thanks again. Have a great day and go win.